Hey there, Aubrey. How's it going? What's shaking?
I'm great, Lindsay. How are you today?
I'm feeling good, but I have a key question, and I bet you're going to throw it right back to me after, too.
Yes.
So I'm ready. So, how do you personally, how do you pronounce the word often?
Yes. I say often with a silent T. I have noticed you say often.
I do.
This is
Yes.
interesting, and we got a question about this. And I really am curious to hear you guys, listeners. Which do you pronounce? Which do you hear more often? We're going to go into this because it's a little bit controversial in the States.
Yeah, it's true. This is fascinating. We're going to get into a little history here, a little etymology,
Hmm.
current opinion. But for me, when I think about the word often, it just feels too soft to say often. I feel like I need a hard consonant. Well, there is a consonant there, the F, but I need like something to spring off of for my
Hmm.
in my pronunciation. I need something harder, like the T.
Yeah,
But
it's
that's just a
interesting.
personal quirk. Yeah.
And well, it's a quirk of your regional dialect. You
Yeah.
likely, your family probably pronounced the T, and a lot of neighbors, this
Yeah.
is very much a lot of pronunciation is based on where you grew up, what you hear. And
Sure.
when it comes to often, if you listen to podcasts and pay attention on TV, you are going to hear both. Like you might sort of feel like one is a little more common than the other, but you absolutely will hear both.
Oh, I'm excited. We are recording this a few months in advance. So, candidly, I'm going to go home for Christmas and listen to everyone saying this word. I'm going to elicit this word from my family and then
Nice.
take a poll and see what
Start
everyone's doing and see
noticing.
what's going on. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yes, very interesting. It reminds me of sort of either and either, where some people might go back and forth, right? And they
Oh,
just
yeah.
don't see one as correct. They're just
Yeah.
variants.
They're like, don't put me in a box, right? Don't put me in a
Exactly.
box. Love that.
Yes.
So, guys, before we get going with today's episode, we want to send you back to another winner of an episode, 2125, which was how to share your faults in English for deeper connection. And we think that one's important because opening up about your drawbacks of your personality or the things you're struggling with builds connection. And we want that for you
Absolutely.
guys. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're willing to share that you're not perfect, you make mistakes,
Yeah.
that creates such a deep bond with whoever you're talking to. And they know you're not
Totally.
judging them for their imperfections, you're admitting yours. What a great way to deepen connections.
Yeah, so go check it out, 2125. All right, we have a question from a listener. Aubrey, could you read it for us?
Yes, and this was in Spotify, and the name was, just letters and numbers, so we can't
Okay.
shout you out, unfortunately, but great question. It is,
Yes.
"Hi, Lindsay, Aubrey, and Michelle. May I ask what's the acceptable pronunciation of the word often or often? Hope you can do an episode on this. Thanks." Oh, Rosie
Oh,
from the
we do have a name.
Philippines. Oh, I'm glad she put her
Lovely.
name in the question.
Great question, Rosie. We so appreciate your questions. Guys, if you do listen over in Spotify, you now can enter your question after any episode. So do that because we read those every single week. Right, Aubrey? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And guys, if you don't have the app yet, you should check it out. If you want to follow along with the episode with the transcripts, this is such
Hmm.
a great way to listen. Go to allearsenglish.com/app. You can get it
Yes.
on iOS or Android.
Yeah, and the level of detail is insane that we use on those transcripts, way beyond what you would see from a machine, right? These are created by us. These are very specific transcripts, so go check them out. All right,
Yes,
let's get into
exactly.
it, Aubrey. Let's get into it.
All right, so
Where do we start?
often just means frequently, right? I often fold laundry. What do you do often, Lindsay?
Oh, let's see. I often take my dog for a walk in the morning. Yeah.
Nice. There you go, right? Just something you do a lot,
Yeah.
frequently, right? And like
Mhm.
we said, there are 2 standard accepted pronunciations. So where Rosie's saying like, what's the acceptable pronunciation? That's what's really interesting is like, can we even say correct pronunciation? With some words, it's really more about asking, what is the standard accepted pronunciation? And then you might want to know what that is and what are all of the different variants so that you know which one to use.
Right, and also why. Maybe you wanna I think our listeners are a smart bunch, and so you guys probably wanna know why, and we're gonna talk about it today. You wanna know a little more context than your average person, right? You don't wanna
Right.
live superficially, you wanna know why is it there are 2 ways that are actually accepted. That's what we're gonna get into today.
Yes, and it's very interesting, right? And so when you're talking about, okay, what is standard accepted? For this word, it actually depends on which dictionary you check. In
Mm,
Webster's dictionary, the pronunciation often with a silent T is is listed as standard accepted pronunciation, and with the T is listed as a variant. But then they have a whole interesting entry about the etymology, about why and what came first that we're going to get into. But other dictionaries just list them both as correct.
Right, right. So it depends on the dictionary you ask, but we know that Americans specifically, many of them are passionate about the only way being, silent T. Is that right?
Yes, we've seen this. I had posted a grammar TikTok, and in the comments, so many people were saying my pet peeve is when someone pronounces often with the T. But then a lot of other people they're like, "What? The only way I've ever said it is with a T. That's the correct way." So
That's
it's a lot of it.
hilarious.
You just don't. You're just used to what is said in your regional dialect, and you assume that's the correct way.
Super interesting. Okay, Aubrey, let's get deeper into this because I think there's a little history we want to know. Can you fill us in on what we need to know here?
Yes, this is fascinating. So, up until the 1500s, the T was pronounced. The word began as a variant of oft, which has become less common. Sometimes I'll see this in church
Yeah,
music, the word
yeah, yeah, yeah.
oft, but we don't use it much in casual conversation, right?
Right. Or I might hear it in poetry or old literature, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And so this is called the medial T when there's a T in the middle of a word like this. And in other words like soften, hasten, and fasten, all of these were originally pronounced with the T. You could hear the T.
Uh-huh.
And, this is, of course, coming from that base word soft, haste, fast. And
Yeah.
all of those T's were pronounced originally. So, really, the original correct pronunciation was often, soften, hasten, and then kind of
Fasten.
changed over time.
Well, this is interesting because when I look at these words, it really depends on the word what I choose to say. So for me, hasten, I can only imagine saying hasten. I can't imagine saying hasten.
Oh, you say hasten. Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. And we don't
Yeah.
use this word all that often, right? It means
Right, right,
to
right. Go
do
faster, right?
something quickly, right? You're trying to
Yeah.
rush. And
Yeah.
I think because we don't hear that as often, we don't realize
Yes.
that there are variants. I say hasten, but I don't hear it very often.
But what about I mean, fasten, I would never
Fasten.
say fasten. I would
No.
never say that. So
But it's
that one is
interesting to know that once
mm.
upon a time, that was the correct pronunciation.
Right, and I think for me, soften. I do both for that, actually. That's like
Interesting. Sometimes you say
soften.
soften.
Oh
Okay,
gosh.
this is really interesting, and I think it's good just to know, like, you're going to hear both, there are variations, but as far
Yeah.
as the history, there was, during the 15th century is when this started changing. English
Mhm.
speakers stopped pronouncing some sounds within consonant clusters in the middle of words like this, just to make language easier to articulate, to be able to speak more quickly, and
Yep.
so a lot of words like handsome and handkerchief, originally,
Mhm.
we pronounced the letters in the middle, it was said handkerchief. Sometimes you'll
Right.
still hear people say that.
Really, that's interesting. So these ones have clearly changed in my mind in terms of what I hear, right? Handsome, not handsome, right?
Right.
Not
We've
handkerchief, but
dropped
you
that D.
maybe yeah, raspberry, we don't say raspberry, right?
Yes, and
Uh,
once upon a time, yeah, in
once
the
upon a
15th
time they
century,
did.
that P would be pronounced, but now it's been
Mm,
dropped. Also chestnut, we would hear
uh-huh.
the T, chestnut, and often.
Fascinating.
But a lot of
Interesting.
English speakers started dropping those,
Mhm.
sounds in the middle of consonant clusters, and like you've said, some
Yeah.
of them you have kept, so this has sort of changed in regional dialects what has been accepted.
And do we know I mean, we'll have to interview one of our British friends from a British podcast about this, but do we know if in British English it's closer to the older way, or are they having the same debate? Do we know, Aubrey?
It's similar in the UK from what I've been researching as the US, where you'll hear both depending on the region. So in certain parts of the UK, you'll always hear the T,
Okay.
often. And I know when I was watching Downton Abbey, I know I heard a couple of them, they
Mm.
would pronounce the T often. And then, but in other
Oh,
parts of the UK, the T is silent. So sort of similar
interesting.
to the United
Okay.
States, neither is really right or wrong. There are two variants depending on your colloquial speech.
Okay, interesting. I mean, in terms of that makes me wanna reflect on where the regions we grew up in. I mean, I grew up in New England, which is I think there's a lot of parallels to British culture in terms of the
Mm,
architecture of this, like the way the streets are set up, the towns. Boston is basically set up like London. It's all like windy streets, like a town.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
it's New England. I mean, it has a lot of remnants. It's kind of a conservative part of the country, but also liberal in a weird way. Um, I could see how New England would kind of create that pronunciation. That's what I'm grasping for something here to try to
Possibly,
figure
right?
out why.
Recognizing
Yeah.
that it's more common in the UK and trying to hold to that a little bit.
Mhm.
Definitely possible. I grew up in the Northwest,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna do the same thing you are talking about when I get together with my family. I'm gonna pay attention, like, do we all say
Yes.
often, or do some
Yeah.
people say often? Because it is possible, depending if someone moves away and lives in another area for a while, they could pick up, something from that regional dialect and change the way they say it.
Yeah, let's reconvene after the holidays and come back and take a poll. Come with our poll results and
Absolutely.
see. Aubrey here.
Yeah, that's for sure gonna be the poll. We wanna know, do you pronounce the T or not? Do you
Oh,
say
for sure.
often or
Yeah.
often?
Yeah, be sure to participate in that poll, guys, so your voice is heard. Okay, we have a role play. Shall we do it?
Yes, and you're gonna hear it both ways here if Lindsay
Okay.
has the I think I have all of them for me, so I'm like, "Nope, you don't
Okay.
get to say often in this
Okay,
role
nothing. I'll say nothing. I'll say nothing.
play." So
All
you
right,
and I
here we
are
go.
discussing our morning routines in this role play.
Okay. All right, here we go.
Do you often sleep in?
Oh, no, I'm an early bird. I usually get up around 7 AM.
Same. I'd love to sleep in, but even on the weekends, my children are often awake early.
What about when you're on vacation without your kids?
I don't often go on a trip without my kids. When I do, though, I still often wake up early. My internal alarm clock won't let me sleep in.
Okay, so I
I
heard a
didn't
lot
do
of
that on purpose. I'm like, I'm keeping Lindsay from saying often in the role play.
clearly, we see
Looks
which
that
one
way.
is superior. No.
I have a
Okay.
prejudice for the
Yeah, you have
silent
a
T.
prejudice. Yeah, I heard a lot of I heard the soft or the often,
Mhm.
often. I often sleep in. Do you often sleep in? Yeah, so that is your style. I love it. I love it that we have some choices.
Yeah,
I
I think
love
we
that
should quickly
fact.
go through this again with
Yeah.
you doing my
Okay.
part so we can hear
Okay.
your
And I'm
hard Ts.
yeah. And as I say these, I'm trying to think about what I would really say. So here we
Okay.
go.
Yes.
So hey Aubrey, do you often sleep in?
No, I'm an early bird. I usually get up around 7.
Same. I'd love to sleep in, but even on the weekends, my children are often awake early.
What about when you're on a vacation without your kids?
I mean, I don't often go on a trip without my kids, but when I do, though, I still often wake up early. My internal alarm clock won't let me sleep in. I
Yeah,
feel
so you
like,
definitely we heard the
yeah,
T in all of them.
yeah. Although there was a moment before I said the last one where I said maybe I would say often there. I think I mix it up.
I
I
still
think
often wake up.
I'm
It
just
could
not
be.
immune to the T. Like I will add the T in when I feel like it.
Mhm,
That
and a
makes
lot
sense.
of often the way we pronounce words is for ease of speech, right? This is why it was dropped. A lot of people found it easier to articulate without
Yep.
those, medial consonant sounds,
Yeah.
and so often it's like the same with contractions. We're dropping sounds in order to speak more quickly.
Yeah, and we advocate that, right? We advocate for connection, right? It's all about connection. So whatever you need to get your message across, focus on the whole message, not the individual words, right?
Absolutely, right? This is not something to stress about. You'll hear natives say it both ways. I think you'll hear this from us quite a bit, but when it comes to pronunciation, rarely is there a correct and incorrect. Or at least
Yeah,
with a lot of words, there are variants, there are accents, there are regional dialects. So I wouldn't correct someone's pronunciation. As long as you're understood, that's what's key.
totally. I mean, the language belongs to the people, right? There's no one best accent, there's no one right way of doing it. So guys, focus on that connection and you will be good to go. Love it.
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks, Lindsay. This was fun.
All right, talk soon. Bye.
Bye.